Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudiraye nashtaprayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. Today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 25, Text 1. The chapter is entitled The Glories of Devotional Service. Shaunaka Uvacha Kapilastattva Sankyata Bhagavan Atma Mayaya Jata Swayam Aja Sakshat Atma Prajnaptaye Nirnam Atma Prajnaptaye Nirnam. Shaunaka Uvacha Kapilastattva Sankyata Bhagavan Atma Mayaya Jata Swayam Aja Sakshat Atma Prajnaptaye Nirnam. Shaunaka Uvacha Kapilastattva Sankyata Bhagavan Atma Mayaya Jataha Swayam Aja Sakshat Atma Prajnaptaye Nirnam. Bhagavan Atma Mayaya Atma Prajnaptaye Nirnam. Kapilastattva Sankyata Shaunaka Uvacha Kapilastattva Sankyata Word to word meaning. Shaunaka Uvacha. Sri Shaunaka said, Kapilaha, Lord Kapila, Tattva of the truth, Sankyata, the expounder, Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Atma Mayaya, by his internal potency, Jataha, took birth, Swayam, himself, Ajaha, unborn, Sakshat, in person, Atma Prajnaptaye, to disseminate transcendental knowledge. Nirnam for the human race. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Sri Shaunaka said, although he is unborn, the Supreme Personality of Godhead took birth as Kapila Muni by his internal potency. He descended to disseminate transcendental knowledge for the benefit of the whole human race. Can actually repeat the translation responsibly. Sri Shaunaka said, although he is unborn, the Supreme Personality of Godhead took birth as Kapila Muni by his internal potency. He descended to disseminate transcendental knowledge for the benefit of the whole human race. Purport. Please hear. The word Atma Prajnaptaye indicates that the Lord descends for the benefit of the human race to give transcendental knowledge. Material necessities are quite sufficiently provided for in the Vedic knowledge, which offers a program for good living conditions and gradual elevation to the platform of goodness. In the mode of goodness, one's knowledge expands. On the platform of passion, there is no knowledge, for passion is simply an impetus to enjoy material benefits. On the platform of ignorance, there is no knowledge and no enjoyment, but simply life almost like that of animals. The Vedas are meant to elevate one from the mode of ignorance to the platform of goodness. When one is situated in the mode of goodness, he is able to understand knowledge of the self or transcendental knowledge. This knowledge cannot be appreciated by any ordinary man. Therefore, since a disciplic succession is required, this knowledge is expounded either by the Supreme Personality of Godhead Himself or by His bona fide devotee. Shaunaka Muni also states here that Kapila, the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, took birth or appeared simply to appreciate and disseminate transcendental knowledge. Simply to understand that one is not matter but spirit soul, Aham Brahmasmi, I am by nature Brahman, is not sufficient knowledge for understanding the self and his activities. One must be situated in the activities of Brahman. Knowledge of those activities is explained by the Supreme Personality of Godhead Himself. Such transcendental knowledge can be appreciated in human society but not in animal society, as clearly indicated here by the word Nirnam, for the human beings. Human beings are meant for regulated life. By nature, there is regulation in animal life also, but that is not like the regulative life as described in the scriptures or by the authorities. Human life is regulated life, not animal life. In regulated life only can one understand transcendental knowledge. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostude Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. This chapter is entitled The Glories of Devotional Service. We just saw in the previous chapter as to how Kardama Muni, to teach by his example as to how one should renounce family life at the right age, even though the Lord was born in his home, and how earlier chapters we saw the austerities he performed and the elevated position of him where he is able to see the Lord face to face, get his blessings. He is also leaving home because his attraction to the Lord and his way of connecting to the Lord is through the rasa or mellow of as servitorship. As you will also see that he approaches Lord Kapila in seclusion, pays obeisances. Being a son, naturally the mellow would be that of Vatsalya. So there might be conflicting emotions there. So that is also another reason why he decides to leave home. And now we will enter into the samvad or conversations between Mother Devahuti and Lord Kapila. So as you all know, you're all learned sages sitting here. So Bhagavatam is like a conversation inside a conversation inside a conversation. So whereas today's verse, it's starting as a conversation. So what is that conversation? Whose conversation is that? Anyone wants to guess? Yeah, Shaunaka is the speaker. Yeah, and who are the audience? Sages of Naimisaranya. So that's why we see that conversation coming in. And a few verses later, you'll see another conversation. The inspiration of the audience, the inspiration of the listeners, that inspires the speaker. So, Sutta Goswami, he is inspired to speak because of the eagerness of whom? Yeah, and today's verse starts with, what's today's verse starting with? What's the first? Shaunaka. So the eagerness of Shaunaka and the other sages assembled there, that inspires Sutta Goswami to speak. And he is going to quote another conversation. So whose conversation is he going to quote? Exactly. He is going to quote the conversation between Maitreya and Vidura. That's going to come up in a few verses down the line. Again, Vidura's eagerness will inspire Maitreya to speak. And he will start describing the conversation between Mother Devahuti and Lord Kapila. This Kapila, Lord Kapila and Devahuti Samvad, that is spoken by Maitreya, seeing the eagerness of Vidura. So is the that sets the context. Hope that's clear. So conversation inside a conversation. So here, Saunaka Rishi, in this particular verse, he is glorifying whom? Who is he glorifying? Lord Kapila. So it's very similar to the appearance of Lord Krishna when the Gita, where Krishna describes in the 4th chapter, Ajopi san avyayatma bhutanam ishvaropi san. So the same word is being used, Atma Maya, by my own internal potency I appear. And that's the word you will see here as well in the verse of discussion today. Bhagavan Atma Maya. And the purpose for his taking birth, as we saw in the purport, what's the purpose of Lord Kapila's birth? What's the purpose? To disseminate transcendental knowledge. Very good. So that's indicated by the word Atma Prajnaptaye, to disseminate transcendental knowledge to the human race. So just to expand on that Atma Maya verse, that word, in 4.6 purport, Prabhupada talks about that particular word and expands on that. This is from the purport 4.6. The word Maya or Atma Maya refers to the Lord's causeless mercy, according to the Vishwakosha dictionary. So the Lord takes birth based on his own will and based on his own mercy. So he is not forced to take birth like other living beings who are born by karma. Karmana daiva netrena jantur. So he is not a jantu. He takes birth according to his own will and according to his, and the word in that particular section, Prabhupada says Prakriti means Swarupa also. So the Lord appears in his own form. That's what is differentiating between him and the human beings. And he appears in his own form as the controller of all beings. Because some of the yogis or some of the eternally liberated associates of the Lord, they also don't take birth. But however, they are not the controller of all living beings. But the Lord is the controller of all living beings, and he takes birth on his own accord based on the Atma Maya, based on his Daivi Prakriti. So that's how Prabhupada explains it, and to put it for a common man to understand, he gives the example of how the sun is always there, but for our eyes, it seems to appear and disappear. It's not that when the sun is set, the sun is gone forever. He is disappearing from our eyes, but the Lord is always there in his various forms. So, the Lord being situated in his spiritual platform, we can contrast that with the material world. Probably we can turn off the fans, at least this one. The contrast is being brought out here as to how the Lord is in the Suddha Sattva platform, and that is made up of the potencies of Samvit and Hladini Shaktis, whereas in the material world, the jivas are bound by the three modes. So that's one of the key themes that's coming up in the purport as to how the living entities are being bound by the three modes, which are Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. So what are the characteristics Prabhupada describes in this particular purport about goodness? Try to explain it to a common man. How would he explain the mode of goodness? What is it characterized by? goodness helps in regulated life. Okay, one point. What else? Specifically, yeah, that's the last point in regulated life. Typical characteristics of goodness is, yeah, goodness, sattvam sanjayate jnanam. So the knowledge component is closely attached to goodness. So that's what Prabhupada is trying to bring out here, that you're bound, the living entities are bound by the three modes. However, there is a way out. Just as we see fire exit signs, it will be in a green color and it will say go this way. Even though you are in a room which is, you are in a dangerous situation, there is an exit sign which says, okay, go out, and then from there you can get out of the situation. So within these three modes, among the three modes, goodness is considered like that exit path where you can get out of the material entanglement. And that is characterized, Lord Krishna describes in the Gita about the characteristics of the mode of goodness. So you can go back and read to that section where he clarifies the characteristics of each mode. It's clearly defined. So one of them is knowledge. Now, with the other modes, what are the problems that Prabhupada is highlighting? What is passion doing to a person? In this particular purport, Prabhupada says passion does what? Sense gratification. So here specifically, Prabhupada is talking about a push or an impetus to enjoy. Enjoy what? Enjoy the material benefits. So there's always a pushing to enjoy material benefits. So passion is characterized by unlimited desires and hankerings. I want and I have desire for that. So when we are characterized by too much of desires and hankering, then we can diagnose ourselves that we are under the mode of passion. Then with the ignorance, Prabhupada explains and he equates it to animals. So there is no knowledge, no enjoyment. So goodness, there is knowledge and enjoyment in the mode of goodness. Passion, there is intense endeavor and there is always desires, hankering, and there is some enjoyment. However, in ignorance there is no knowledge, no enjoyment, but simply living like that of animals. So here we see the contrast how the Lord is situated in the Suddha Sattva platform, pure goodness, and the living entities are bound by the three modes and they are struggling in this material existence, although they may not realize that. Now, what's the solution is to lift the living entities out of these three modes gradually and take them to the Suddha Sattva platform. And for that purpose, Vedas are there. The ultimate goal is to not only get out of this material existence and realize that I am by nature Brahman, because that realization alone will take you out of the material world, but it will not give you an entry into the spiritual world. Why is that? It's because you do not know what should I do in the spiritual world. I know I'm come out of the material world, yes, there is a sense of happiness, absence of misery, and you may call that as happiness. But soul by nature is very active. It wants to do some activities. If you are not sure what you're going to do in the spiritual world, you cannot enter into the spiritual world. And that's why here in this purport, Prabhupada emphasizes that this knowledge alone is not sufficient. One has to know what I will do in the spiritual world. So then you can enter. And for that purpose, Lord appears to teach knowledge, which also which is also comprises of devotional activities. That's our 13th chapter. One of the key items of knowledge is devotional service. So We were discussing the items of knowledge, amanitvam, adambitvam, humility, pridelessness. In that, spontaneous devotion is also there. So that is knowledge. So that knowledge will not only take you out of this material world, but also gives you what will I do in the spiritual world. So 9th chapter of the Gita gives a lot of inspiring verses as to what goes on in the spiritual world. That's why it's like the confidential knowledge. So there you will understand offering Lord love and devotion, a leaf, fruit, a flower or water, always discussing His glories, worshipping. This is what we are meant to do in the spiritual world. So this is the complete knowledge, and this will take you out of the material world and give you entrance into the spiritual world. And this is how you move from the different modes. When you engage in devotional service, you're moving out of the 3 modes and entering into the Suddha Sattva platform. You gain a glimpse of that experience, and then you get a taste, and gradually you lose taste for the lower modes, and you climb, you ascend, you get out of the entanglement, and then you start moving towards goodness and then pure goodness. So here by saying that Vedas are meant to elevate one from the mode of ignorance to the platform of goodness. So goodness is like an intermediate goal. Like for example, you have a bigger project, then there will be some milestones within that. So goodness is like a stepping stone. Prabhupada says mode of goodness is like a stepping stone from which you transcend that also and go to the mode of pure goodness. So this is how, when I read the purport, I made the connection with my limited understanding as to how the Lord is appearing. He is in Suddha Sattva platform, whereas the living entities are struggling in this material world, and He gives the knowledge either by Himself or through the disciplic succession, and it is especially meant for the human beings. So here we don't find non-human beings coming and sitting and hearing spiritual topics, because in the human life you have this ability to inquire, question. That's why this is given, and the Lord gradually uplifts the living beings from the different modes to the platform of pure goodness. And that's what we saw is in the, it's a combination of, pure goodness is a combination of Samvit and Hiladini. And as we know, this material world is a reflection of the spiritual world. Therefore, you will see the 3 modes are there representing all the 3 in the spiritual world, like Sandit, Sandini, Samvit, Hiladini. They are the potencies in the spiritual world. They are reflected in the material world as the 3 modes. So you purify, get out of it, and then you ascend to the spiritual world, and you enter. That's why Krishna says, Vishate tat anantaram. You enter into the spiritual world, not just coming out of Brahman, coming out of the material existence, entering the Brahman effulgence, being there, and then soul being active, not without the knowledge of spiritual activities. Prabhupada will say, eventually they will fall down. Patanti ado. Living entities will fall down, even though they have gone up to the platform of Brahman realization. So this is what Lord Kapila is going to teach, and in the subsequent verses, Lord Kapila will make this point about mind attached to the modes is the cause of bondage. Okay? And mind, when it's attached to devotion and the activities of devotion, that causes liberation. The best way to attach the mind to the Lord is through these devotional activities, and therefore bhakti is the best. Because Lord Kapila is going to explain jnana and Ashtanga Yoga also. But he will bring out this point straight away. That's why this chapter is glories of devotional service is brought out. So this Adhyatmika Vidya, which Lord Kapila is going to teach, has got the component of bhakti, component of Sankhya, and component of Yoga also. Among these three, Bhakti is independent. It's not dependent on a person's ability to know the knowledge or his ability to do all those yogasanas. So Bhakti is not dependent on these other processes, whereas other processes need an element of Bhakti for them to succeed. So clearly Lord Kapila will establish the supremacy of Bhakti, and he'll glorify, and how to gain Bhakti, that's what he's going to explain in this chapter. And further down in 29th chapter, again he will explain about Bhakti. Having established the supremacy of Bhakti, the practitioners of Bhakti, however, are still struggling in the modes. The next discussion I wanted to focus on how a devotional service gives you a list of activities. We know the 5 potent forms of devotional activities which give immense results. So could someone tell me the 5 potent forms of devotional service? Each one can tell one. Yeah, okay. Sadhu Sangha, okay, which means association with the devotees. That is stages. What I'm asking is the 5 potent forms of devotional. Mathuravas, which means, in simple term, layman's, residing in a holy place. So we've got 2 of that. So one is Sadhu Sangha, one is residing in a holy place. What else? Anyone else? Yeah, chanting the holy names. Anyone else? Any which is missing? Hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. The 5th is deity worship. So you got the 5 items. Is this clear? So chanting of the holy name. What comes next? Hearing of the Srimad Bhagavatam. You do that in the association of the devotees. Then we may not be so exalted that we can just sit in a place and just chant the holy names. So we need a temple and a deity. And deity worship regulates us, which is one of the themes in today's purport, and helps us transcend the modes, come to the mode of goodness, and eventually go to the Suddha Sattva. So deity worship is there. Then holy places are like a place where it is surcharged by the presence of the Lord, where He enacted His pastimes, and as per advanced devotees, they are able to see those pastimes even now because they are qualified. So it's a spiritually surcharged environment where you go, recharge your spiritual batteries, and then come back and continue our preaching activities. So residing in those spiritual dham, especially Mathuravas is the technical term. Did I miss out anything? Hearing, chanting, hearing Bhagavatam in the association of devotees, deity worship, yeah. So all these 5 potent forms of devotional service, we can pick each one and then see how, time permitting, not all of them, at least few of them, how the 3 modes affect these 5 potent forms. So first one of them I want to pick up is chanting, and then let's analyze how the mode of ignorance takes over chanting. So would somebody like to tell or describe how chanting can be overpowered by the mode of ignorance? Anyone who has not spoken so far. How is chanting overpowered by the mode of ignorance? It's a good point. However, my current question is, we have clearly established Bhakti is transcendental. We are talking about how the practitioners of Bhakti are coming under the modes and how it is preventing them from achieving the full power of Bhakti. And in that context, we have taken chanting, and we are asking specifically how the mode of ignorance overpowers chanting. Inattentiveness, sleepiness. Sorry? Aparad. Yeah. So, before I dwell into this, I'm not talking about devotees who are stretching themselves out and doing various services, and during their japa they may tend to doze off. I'm not talking about them, because I don't have the audacity to talk about such exalted devotees who are doing a lot of services and they are managing their chanting also. I'm talking about, I'll probably talk about myself, how sleep overpowers my chanting. So when we are letting that laziness and lethargy, what's the third one? Indifference. These three makes us get into the mode of ignorance and not want to come out, and still we want to finish our chanting. So many times I've done that in the past. I had a job in St. Leonard's or sometimes in the city, come back exhausted, and you have a pile of rounds to chant. Not even want to change my office dress. Just I want to chant off and finish off my rounds in that mood of laziness, lethargy, tiredness. Which means you still want to dwell in that mode and you are doing the devotional activities, which means you are allowing yourself the mode to overpower you. Now we'll discuss the solutions next. Now, what could be the scenario where you are chanting in the mode of passion? We saw the characteristics of passion as unlimited desires and hankerings and longings. So how could the mode of passion affect your chanting? Chanting with material desires. Okay. Chanting for fulfilling material desires. Have you ever sat down to chant and then you start to make plans? Has anyone done that? Yeah? So, recently I had the opportunity to undergo some training in the related to yoga, the Hatha Yoga part. The teacher is a very staunch practitioner of Bhakti Yoga. So he was able to bring out this point about how the ideal scenario of a meditation should be that you are neither sleeping, fully, completely relaxed and you are knocked off, or you're in the other extreme, you're hyperactive, looking here, looking there, and then you're doing your, supposedly doing your chanting. Or even if you're not looking around, eyes closed, inside your mind you're starting to make plans. So that is not the ideal way to do any yoga practice. For that matter, mantra meditation also. One of the Bhakti Vrikshas where I was asked to address the question, the challenge was posed, Prabhu, I get a lot of ideas about solving my work problems when I'm sitting down and chanting. Has anyone experienced that? All the solutions for your problems which you need to solve in your office or something else comes up when you're chanting, which is plan making basically, which is in the mode of passion, which doesn't allow the holy name to touch you, to allow the holy name to bestow the mercy on you, because you're preventing. So I've either heard Prabhupada or someone mentioning that chanting time is not planning time, but it is pleading time. It is pleading time. You plead to the Lord. So when you start making plans, it's moving from one thing to the other, its intelligence is hyperactive. So I told the devotee, maybe you can put down the beads, finish off your plan, write what came up, and then after it's done, you put that aside, and then come back and sit down and chant. A reason, because the Lord is giver of the intelligence. And if that's what you want to focus on while you're chanting to fix your material problem, so what is He going to do? He is going to give that. And if you want to pursue that path, he is going to encourage you, and that's what happens. And your 16 rounds is gone, making plans, to-do lists, shopping lists. So jumping from making plans for the future or worrying about the past, jumping. So this is not how chanting has to be done. You could now practically see how the modes are overpowering the practice of bhakti. The solution, the devotee suggested that we must come to the mode of goodness where we are present with the holy name. You are relaxed as far as the distractions are concerned, you give them up, but you are alert and focused on the mantra, on the process. So this is called relaxed awareness, and this is how you have to chant. And when he made that point, and then we had a demonstration of yoga practice called Yoga Nidra, and after teaching that he elaborated it, and this is how you must be chanting also. You're not sleeping, you're not hyperactive, but you must be with the mantra in the present moment, hearing, and you will feel the presence of the mantra. So this is how you overcome the influence of mode of ignorance and passion. So if you're coming back from work, take a bath, put on devotional dress, nice tilak, sit in front of the altar. Not every day is going to be good days. There will be good days, bad days, ugly days, but you have a standard routine at least. One may say it takes my time because I have only so much of time, and I want to finish as I said, I want to finish off my rounds. With that limited time, I've got dinner to cook, I have to sleep, all of that. So, but look at the quality, reflect on the quality that you're putting in. You're allowing the mode of passion and ignorance to overpower that particular part. So at least come to the mode of goodness, turn on Prabhupada's japa and chant with that in the background if that's okay with you. But that will overcome these three: lethargy, indifference and distractedness. When you know that somebody much spiritually exalted is chanting along with you, so then that will help us bring it back, bring the focus back. The other key which His Holiness Sachinandan Maharaj gives is, it's there in the SoundCloud. If you look at his japa reflections or japa inspiration, if you search for that, you will get. So he made a very interesting point, and he is quoting from Hari Bhakti Vilas as to how any devotional activity, if you don't set the, you don't clarify who you are, what you're doing, and what's the goal, that's called Bhuta Suddhi prayers. So he said that you have to do this, and it will immensely help for you to remove the obstacles while you are chanting. So the key point is you establish yourself that I am the servant of the servant of the servant of my spiritual master and my Param Guru, and I'm completely separate from my gross and material bodies. I'm not a Brahmana, Vaishya, Kshatriya, Shudra. I'm not a Brahmachari, Grihastha, Vanaprastha or a Sannyasi. I am a Gopi Bharat Pada Kamalayor, Dasanudas. The Lord is my ultimate shelter. I am covered by these three modes, and this material world is a place where I have to get these propensities corrected. And the Lord is my only shelter. So, and then you make a sankalpa that I will chant my rounds attentively. So this Bhuta Suddhi prayers is there for those who do deity worship. They might be familiar with this. So Maharaj is suggesting that you do that, you situate yourself, and whenever the mind wanders, bring it back with this, I am completely separate from this gross and subtle bodies. So he drives home the point that every day we are walking very closely towards death. We don't know. At that time, everything will be taken away from you. Whatever we are holding on to, making plans, everything. So at that time, what will save you is just that. So remembering that and setting that sankalpa before we begin chanting helps us to overcome the influence of the modes and do this powerful devotional activity without the influence of the three modes. So later on, Lord Kapila will also explain these things, how a practitioner of bhakti may come under these modes. If you're doing bhakti with the motivation, with the feelings of envy, hatred, violence, that's under the mode of ignorance. You're doing it to gain material benefits, as few of you told. That's passion. And doing chanting to get out of this world, to get liberated, that's in the mode of goodness. Even that has to be given up. So we saw, out of the 5, we saw one. We'll see another one, which is hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. So the next section which I'm going to speak is based on His Holiness Bhakti Vigyan Goswami Maharaj's lecture, and another devotee has written an article based on that lecture. So the theme of the lecture and the article is that we have been hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, I don't know, for many years now. And Bhagavatam, when we hear, what is it supposed to do? Shrinvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hridyantastohi Abhadrani Viduhnoti Shurutsatam. So translation goes like this. Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is Paramatma, super soul in everyone's heart and the benefactor of the truthful devotees. This is the Lord. And what is He doing? When you hear Bhagavatam, cleanses the desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee. What's the nature of the devotee? He has developed the urge to hear the messages of God, of Krishna. That's what we discussed initially, the eagerness of the audience to hear the messages. So what's the nature of the message? They are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. So this is Divinity and Divine Service, that chapter 1.2, very important verse. So Maharaj raises an interesting point. So we have been hearing Srimad Bhagavatam for many years, so all the dirt must have been gone, and we must be experiencing bhava, prema, and rolling in the ground and experiencing all the ecstatic symptoms. Why is it not happening? Why is the heart not changing, transforming, despite hearing Srimad Bhagavatam for many years? So he raises this question and answers by quoting Srila Prabhupada's purport for that particular verse. Maharaj focuses on one particular word, two words. Messages of the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna are non-different from Him. This is the purport line. Whenever, therefore, offenseless hearing, I repeat, offenseless hearing and glorification of God are undertaken, it is to be understood that Lord Krishna is present there in the form of transcendental sound, which is as powerful as the Lord personally. So what's the two words? Offenseless hearing. So that's what Maharaj zooms into, and then he expands by bringing in the three modes. How we could be hearing Srimad Bhagavatam also under the three modes. He just focuses on the mode of passion. Mode of ignorance, obviously, again, I'm not talking about devotees who are extremely tired and still come to the Bhagavatam class and want to hear. We may be overpowered by sleep when we are in the Bhagavatam class, so that's the mode of ignorance. We try our best to come out of that. So the mode of passion, Maharaj explains, and he gives solutions also. So 3 things if we are looking for in a Bhagavatam class, when we are sitting and hearing Bhagavatam class, if we are looking for these 3 things and we are planning for these 3 things or expecting one of them, so then you come under the mode of passion. First one he says is Vishaya, means expecting that the speaker of the Bhagavatam is going to entertain me. He is going to tell nice stories, nice pastimes, crack some jokes, keep me engaged, and that's what is going to make me enjoy Srimad Bhagavatam. So going in with this expectation, that is the first block. Then the next one is, which I felt it directly hit me, it was very relevant for me, I felt, is sitting in a class, trying to note down the points, parallelly making plans how I will speak, or even better than the speaker, somewhere else. So parallelly I am hearing, but I am in my own world. A pop-up will come where I am giving this, making this. So all the plans are going on while I am hearing. At this point I can tell better. I already know this. Or maybe I know better than the speaker. All of this is going on parallelly. Vishaya, what was that? Vishaya is the first one. Yasha is the second one, desiring for fame. And this Yasha, the third one is closely related to Yasha, is Aishwarya. I'll gain control over a group of people by speaking all the points that is I'm hearing, and I'll gain control over others. So Vishaya, Yasha and Aishwarya. Expectation to entertain, then sitting with a desire for fame and planning for your next speech, and then trying to control others based on what you have heard. So when I read that, I extremely felt like this is relevant for me, because many times I hear lectures because of that. Then you'll be hearing for many years, but transformation of the heart will not happen. That cleansing will not happen, because this is offensive hearing, and this comes under mode of passion. Now what's the solution is, one has to give up all of this, and what's the correct mentality is you develop strong faith in the words of Guru. That means complete surrender to the words of Guru and Krishna, and we must take it into our heart with this mentality and apply. So I'm going to hear with the desire to transform my heart. The second characteristic is not to think that I know this topic, but I am extremely humble, I'm extremely fallen, I desperately need to hear this. It is meant for me. I need to hear this. Even I've heard it many times, maybe I'm not applying it, or maybe I am applying it in the wrong way. Why is this particular message being told to me? I desperately need to hear this. So one has to have that dhainya bhavana. The third one is, of course, fixing the mind from jumping from one place to the other, to the other, to the other. And to illustrate this point, a story is told, which I'll tell in a brief way. Sripad Madhvacharya, when he is on his travel to preach, he will carry a lot of books, and these books are carried by a bull. So animals are usually restless, and especially when they're chewing food. You've seen cow or a bull eating the food and then going and sitting back and starting to chew. Have you seen that? So they'll start to chew. But the speciality of this particular bull is that whenever Srila Madhvacharya starts to speak, it will stop chewing and will put up his ears and start hearing. So this is so we shouldn't be chewing on what the mind is giving us. we should stop that and start hearing, so that it transforms the heart. Just to finish off the story, later on that bull took birth as a king, and that king later on became part of the disciplic succession of Sripad Madhvacharya and wrote a lot of commentaries. And Madhvacharya himself will told, who will write after you, a disciplic succession, who will write more books? This bull will write. So stop chewing what the mind is telling us and then start hearing. Then the next very important thing is hearing with the intent of how I'm going to apply this in my own life with sharp intelligence. How am I going to apply this in my life? So that contemplation, if that's not there, as Maharaj says, we hear many lectures, we hear very, very good points, we come after that we appreciate the speaker, but then after that, few hours, few days later, what did you hear? What changed? Maybe nothing. So then we could be hearing for many years. We might be doing it not with very specific intention, but we might be committing these offenses while we are hearing. So then transformation will not happen. So we don't have time to cover all the 5 potent forms, but you get the idea. So you can extend it and see and introspect as to how the modes are very powerful. Their characteristics are being described in the Gita. We can introspect and analyze as to how these modes overpower the most powerful form of bhakti, the angas of bhakti, and thereby attain the transformation of heart, which is what we are aiming for, and transcend the modes and reach the Suddha Sattva platform. I'll conclude here and see if there are any questions on what we discussed today. Yes, comments. Is there an extra mic? So we hear for the pleasure of Krishna. Okay. Okay, so hearing Srimad Bhagavatam for the pleasure of Krishna. Okay. Chai. Thank you. What happens to a person who lives a pious life without the transcendental knowledge? So because he's doing a lot of piety, like donating or charity or helping some sadhus, over a period his piety builds up, and we call it as sukriti. Over a period it builds up, and then that produces faith in bhakti, and then from there he begins again. So if he is supporting any devotional activities, that is considered as bhakti, and that is not